So how much cash should you be holding in your stock portfolio right now? Since we're apparently getting very close to some sort of a recession, then it would make sense that you would need to have more cash on the sidelines. And the reason for that is because if there is an economic downturn, stocks are likely going to fall with that recession, and you want to have plenty of cash available to you so that you can make those investments. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how you can understand how much cash you should be holding in your portfolio at any time, and I'm going to be explaining my opinion on how much cash you should have going into 2019 as we get closer to this apparent economic recession that is supposed to be happening in the next few years, if not in the next few months. So let's start by breaking down the difference between a cash investment and a stock investment. And that's right, I said a cash investment because in my opinion, I consider holding cash an investment. You're investing in that cash, and that cash is going to go down in value due to inflation at somewhere between 1 to 2% per year. However, there obviously is an advantage to holding cash. But first, let's just talk about the long term. And over the long term, cash is most definitely going to do worse for you than holding stocks. Broadly speaking, businesses go up on average at about 8 to 10% per year if you include all of the stocks, say in the US or Australian market. And if you compare that to cash as something which is going to be affected by inflation, it's not going to grow as an investment. And in fact, it's going to go down and it's going to lose purchasing power by 1 to 2% each year. You can clearly see that over the long term, you want your money to be in businesses, in stocks, so that it can compound over the long term. However, there is a particular time when cash outperforms stocks, and that is when there is a broad economic recession. Your cash position looks a whole lot better when stocks are going down at 30% in 1 year, and that can happen if we do have a recession, which we generally have somewhere between every 3 and 8 years. And it's been more than 10 years since our last recession. And of course, if you have plenty of cash on the sidelines, then not only do you not lose money in the stock market from your stocks falling dramatically through that short period of time, you can use that cash and deploy it into stocks when their prices are cheap. Apple, let's say Apple, Facebook, any of these massive companies that have been around for a while and are probably going to continue to be around over the long term, their business is not changed by their stock price going down 30% in a year. They're just 30% cheaper. So if you have lots of cash on the sidelines, you can deploy this cash when it's cheap and capitalize on the massive returns that you will experience on those stocks when you've bought them below intrinsic value. So clearly it's a bad idea to be 100% in stocks, because if you're 100% in stocks, then when we have a downturn, not only will your portfolio experience a dramatic drop and will have to recover over many years, but you don't have any cash available to you to buy those businesses at cheap prices. And it's also a pretty bad idea to have 100% in cash, because as we spoke about earlier in this video, cash massively underperforms businesses over the very long term. So the real question here is how much should you have in cash and how much should you have in equities? So there's a few factors that influence your decision to have a particular amount in cash and a particular amount in equities. The first factor is the economic cycle. Now, if you want to learn more about the economic cycle, or as Ray Dalio calls it, the economic machine, and how debt cycles work and how productivity increases over the long term, then I'll leave a link to his great 30-minute video down in the description below, and you can check that out, and he does a great job at explaining how the economic cycles work. And the reason that this is the first factor is that because depending on where we are in this economic cycle, you will want to have different amounts of your money in stocks versus equities. If we are near the end of the economic cycle, meaning that we're expected to have some kind of an economic downturn in the near future, in the next couple of years, then you would want to have more cash available, because we can't predict exactly when that's going to happen. But if you have more cash available, when it does happen, it means you're not going to be destroyed by having too much of your money in the market. And in the same way, when we're at the very beginning of an economic cycle, when we've just had a recession, then you would want to have more of your money deployed in equities. Because if we're at the beginning of an economic cycle, then over the next 3 to 8 years, or even more, as we've seen over the past 11 years, those businesses are going to become more valuable, while your cash is going to become less valuable at 1 to 2%. So in that circumstance, over that period, during the growth of the economic cycle, over the positive part of the economic cycle, you want to have most of your money in businesses so that it can compound itself and grow. You should think of your stock position in your portfolio as your bet that the market's going to go up and your cash position as a bet that it's going to go down. Because the reason that you're holding cash is because you think that the equities that you want to buy, the investments you want to make, you think they're going to be cheaper in the future. Now, you're never going to be 100% betting on stocks or 100% betting on cash, but your balance between those two is your bet. And if I had to give my non-financial advice opinion here, I would say that it's very likely we're going to see an economic downturn in the next 5 years, and obviously that's a very long time, and it gives me plenty of there's a very high chance I'm going to be right by giving that much leadway. But that indication means that you're going to want to have at least some amount of cash available to you, because we don't know when it's going to happen. But if it does happen, you definitely want to have some proportion of cash on the sidelines waiting for that moment. For me personally, I'm sitting on about 50% in equities and 50% in cash. And part of that reason is because I think we're near the end of this economic cycle, but part of it leads into the next factor, which is the valuation of individual businesses. So there is a few businesses that I personally know very well, and I understand how much cash I can get back from those investments over the long term. And by getting cash back, I simply mean there's two ways you can get cash back from a business. Either the stock price goes up, or they pay you a dividend, or a combination of the both. And that's what I mean by getting cash back. So there's a particular number of businesses. I have a fairly short list of businesses that I follow very closely, and I know with a fair amount of predictability how much I'm going to get back in dividends and in stock price appreciation from those over the long term. And with that, it means I have prices at which I'm willing to pay, and also a price at which I would be happy to let it go to somebody else, because the amount that I can get in cash instantly from that transaction, from selling it and getting cash instantly, is a lot better than what I'm going to get from the stock over the next 10 years. Now, the reason valuation is a factor is because towards the economic cycle where we are right now, likely where we are right now, stocks become more expensive because there's more money piling into the market. More people are optimistic about the fact that stocks have been going up consistently for the past 10 or more years. And for that reason, stock prices are elevated. And that basically means that I'm more incentivized to sell my stocks, because if I can get $100 right now for a stock that's going to deliver me $110 over the next 10 years, I'll just take the 100 now and sit on it until we have a recession, but when I can deploy it again. And that way I'll probably make more than the 110 that I would if I continued to hold it. And in the same way, if I'm looking to deploy more money into the market, if I'm looking to make further investments in the market, if the prices are really high relative to how much cash I can get back, I'm not going to be interested in making those purchases. And for that reason, slowly over time, starting at around 2017, 18, and now into 2019, my cash position has been increasing substantially because I haven't been buying anything in the market, because nothing is offering me a very big return in terms of how much I'm putting out compared to what I'm getting back at a margin of safety. So for that reason, valuation will also come into your decision here. If you can't find anything that can offer you a massive return with a margin of safety, then you're not going to be buying anything, and your cash is going to continuously build up. The third and final factor is whether or not your portfolio is a stationary portfolio or it's one that you're constantly adding to from a separate income source. So there's generally two types of portfolios that you will have. One is a stationary portfolio, which you're not adding to, and that means that there's a set amount of money in that, and you have to grow that money over the long term. And if that's the case, then your cash pile is limited. It means that you need to be more accurate in your decision making, because towards the end of that economic cycle, you need to sell a lot of stocks in order to get into cash to buy stocks back when they're cheaper. However, if you have a portfolio, which is going to be most people, this is the second option, is going to be most people, where you have a separate income source from your job or your business, and you're moving money constantly into that portfolio, then that means that your cash pile is constantly growing. And you don't have to be as accurate, because because if you're not buying stocks, then your cash pile is going to continuously grow. And even during a recession, if you do have a substantial amount of your equities in stock, a substantial amount of your money in stocks, your portfolio in stocks, then at least you're going to get money from your income source coming in, which you can use to deploy into your stocks. And the other thing to consider if you have a portfolio where there's income constantly coming into it is that when you can't find opportunities, your cash pile might get too big. So I certainly don't want to ever have a cash pile that's probably more than 60% compared to 40% of stocks, or 70-30 maybe at the most. So for that reason, I'm going to need to put some of that cash into stocks even if they can't offer me a massive return. So I will, if it gets to that point where I have way too much cash on the sidelines, then I will deploy some of that cash into businesses that offer me a safe return, even if it's not a massive return as I'm looking for most of the time. But you also need to be aware of the fact that there could be an economic downturn. So you certainly don't want to commit all of your money into stocks if you're not safely getting a big return. If stocks are offering you 8 to 10% and you have way too much cash, then put some of it to work. But if you certainly don't want to be 100% in stocks there, and you also need to make sure that you're keeping enough cash on the sidelines, so when those stocks drop 50% and instead of yielding 8%, they're now yielding 16%, then you can deploy a lot of your money into the stock market. For me personally, I just don't see myself buying huge amounts of equities in 2019 unless we do have an economic downturn. As I said earlier, most of the stocks that are on my shortlist are at prices that are really high relative to the cash I can get back, so I'm not interested in putting lots of money behind them. However, of course, I will have income coming in from my business, so if that cash pile gets too big, then I will be deploying small amounts of that to keep my cash pile just down underneath that 60-70% range. And if I can find businesses, which I do have businesses available that can offer me safely 8 to 10%, I will take those opportunities. But thanks for watching, everyone, and if you did enjoy this video, I would appreciate if you leave a like. It helps me out so much. But I guess I will see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.